statues that have been sitting there for 100 years in the rotunda. We'd like the real representatives to come back and join us in negotiating to end the shutdown, which is what we want, but also to do something to help Americans with their health care. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, this really is a turning point for our country, and a turning point in our fight to make health care more accessible for all Americans. For the first time in 6 years, the government is shut down. And certainly nobody wanted to get to this point, including me. But we're here for one reason, because the MAGA Republicans shut down the government because they refused to address the health care crisis that they've created. Earlier this summer, the administration passed their, what we call the Big Bad Betrayal Act, as we call it, at a time when Americans are begging for financial relief. They were stripped of the health care, faced with the loss of health care for 15 million people. That's right. The MAGA Republicans have gutted more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years from Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, health care that literally millions of Americans rely on. And we're not just talking years in the future, it starts this month. At the end of this year, the Affordable Care Act's tax credits will expire unless Republicans act now to extend them. If they don't, and they are clearly divided on this issue, premiums across the country, on average, are going to double starting next year. As a little perspective, that means many Coloradans will pay over $1,000 more for health care in 2026 than they did in 2025. Now, insurance companies are just starting to notify Americans about these massive cost increases. And you talk about a kick in the gut. When I was governor, we expanded health care to 400,000 Coloradans with help from the ACA tax credits. We got to 96% coverage for Coloradans to have health care. MAGA Republicans want to undo that progress, and we shouldn't let that happen. It doesn't end there. The budget bill is the centerpiece of a much broader campaign to strip health care coverage away from millions and millions of Americans. The moment the president took office, MAGA Republicans essentially handed him and Secretary Kennedy a free pass to attempt to dismantle our public health care system and to destroy much of the science-backed public health policy. Now, what exactly did they do? Well, the president and RFK Jr. fired every single member of the CDC's independent panel on vaccines and replaced them with vaccine skeptics, people that really didn't believe too much in the value of vaccines. Then when the president's own CDC director voiced her opposition, they fired her too. Now, that puppet panel completely changed the COVID vaccine recommendations for Americans. Now folks across the country are struggling to figure out whether they can get a vaccine at the pharmacy and what it's going to cost. The president's first administration oversaw Operation Warp Speed, which developed the first COVID vaccines in what was almost a miraculously rapid time frame. But now he's actively undermining that same science. It's astounding. Reproductive health care, they're gutting that too. Again, back when I was governor in Colorado, we made free and low-cost birth control accessible to every Coloradan. We reduced unwanted pregnancies by almost 60%. Now this administration is doing everything they can to eliminate the last remaining abortion protections. They're threatening access to mifepristone, a medication that's been proven safe and effective for nearly 30 years. On top of that, they've completely given up on things like fighting cancer, slashing hundreds of millions of dollars in cancer-related research grants. That's right, you heard me clearly, cancer. Now we can't even agree that cancer is worth beating. If that wasn't enough, the White House actually reached out, publicized, the president talked to pregnant women, told pregnant women not to trust their doctors, but that they can feel assured that taking Tylenol while you're pregnant would cause autism. They did this without any scientific proof. It's hard to believe that they were telling pregnant women that Tylenol was going to cause autism. It's, in many ways, one large diabolical fear tactic. And it puts the health of so many Americans at risk. And we can't let it continue, which really brings us to this showdown. We're asking for this administration to negotiate and to take basic action to restore health care to Americans. MAGA Republicans I think they should be thanking us for giving them an off-ramp to undo the horrendous cuts that are going to ruin people's lives, real lives. It will cost people their lives. So far, no one seems to be listening, but here's what's at stake if we don't hold our ground. I recently, a couple weeks ago, visited a nursing home in Lakewood, Colorado. Now, many Americans don't know this, but Medicaid covers the cost of roughly 60% of residents in nursing homes across the country. At the facility I visited in Lakewood, over 90% of the residents are there because of Medicaid. I sat in a circle surrounded by residents, some with disabilities, and their caregivers, all trying to understand what these cuts meant for their health, for their lives. One resident told me point blank that Medicaid saved his life. He said he would still be living on the streets without it because the cost of his epilepsy medication was far too high. His health care, his medication, the roof over his head is now under threat with these cuts coming to Medicaid. This is a very sobering truth. If you're a single adult in Colorado, you don't even qualify for Medicaid. You'll be making too much to qualify for Medicaid if you earn more than $1,735 a month. That is $10 an hour. If you make more than $10 an hour, you don't qualify for Medicaid. So you've got to be working, and you've got to make less than $10 an hour. Pretty easy to verify, and creating the red tape and bureaucracy to get at these mythical cases of abuse, it defies rational thought. The president's big ugly bill doesn't just put a $1 trillion hole in health care, but it creates mountains of paperwork and endless reams of red tape. It creates challenges for people with disabilities, and people making $10 an hour are going to have a real hard time navigating. And if they fill out a form incorrectly or they don't turn it in on time, they get something wrong, they'll get kicked right off of health care. It's immoral. It's inhumane. This is what Medicaid is for, to make sure Americans get the care they need to stay alive, to keep shelter over their heads when they need around-the-clock care. All of it's under threat. Take one look on social media and you'll see why the White House and MAGA are trying to make this into one big joke. It's a carnival of jokes. But they can't avoid the suffering and the fear that their actions are causing. Americans elected a president because he promised to fight for the people who slipped through the cracks. But he's turning the very ground they stand on into quicksand. MAGA Republicans have passed a bill to take health care from 15 million Americans. Americans with cancer, sick kids, people living in nursing homes. With the money they saved, they gave trillion-dollar tax breaks, in many cases, to the wealthiest of Americans and to the largest of corporations. Now, hundreds of rural hospitals and clinics are at risk of closure. Millions of Americans are going to be uninsured. Many of them have pre-existing conditions, which will make them getting insurance again nearly impossible. And they're going to be faced with health care premiums that will be doubling. And that's for literally millions of Coloradans, or millions of Americans. And we're not talking decades in the future. We're talking about next month when these premiums go up. By November 1st, Coloradans on the marketplace plans that they get from the healthcare exchange, they'll be getting the terrifying news, the alert from the insurance company that their premiums are about to increase. What we're being told is that some Colorado families are going to see price tags $1,000 a month higher than what their normal payments were. Democrats are fighting for one thing: to protect the essential care that millions of Americans rely on every single day. It's about making sure that moms and dads, little kids, grandparents, newborn babies don't fall through the trillion-dollar hole that MAGA has created in our healthcare system. Let's work together, let's reopen the government and protect the healthcare for the people of this country. We'll be waiting and ready at the negotiating table. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back the floor.
President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I think there is a tendency in this place, but probably in the country writ large, to compartmentalize each news cycle, to get outraged by every new contest to free speech or to the rule of law or to the power of Congress, but to really never see the full picture. Yesterday's assault on a particular democratic norm is forgotten, and we just wake up the next day to some new outrage. And I know that when people like me start talking about creeping authoritarianism in America, a lot of my Republican colleagues tune out. They think it's hyperbole or just politics. But I think it's time for all of us, Republicans and Democrats, to really step back and come to terms with the full picture of what is happening right now in America. I know that there are many Republicans in this chamber who are not ready to give up on democracy. But there are a group of radicals surrounding the president who have convinced him to operationalize a plan that is designed to try to crush political opposition and dissent in this country. When democracies die, sometimes it's in a coup, sometimes it's through violence, sometimes it's the occupation of the Parliament building, sometimes it's the cancellation of elections. But normally, that's not how democracies wither and vanish. In countries that have lost healthy democracy, normally what happens is that over time, the regime, the party in power, just contracts the space for dissent, for speech, for political opposition, such that while elections still happen, the opposition party can never win. The rules get rigged, essentially, so that the party in power never, ever loses. That is the plan. That is what President Trump and the radicals around him are trying to do to America. I know that many of my colleagues aren't on board for this plan, but I worry that many of my colleagues refuse to see it in its totality because they deal with one outrage at a time. They justify one assault at a time without seeing the full scope of it. We aren't on the verge of an authoritarian takeover. We are in the middle of it. Now, it's not a fait accompli. It is not certain to be successful. But if we aren't clear-eyed about what is happening, then we have no chance to arrest it. If my Republican colleagues don't force themselves to pull back and see the totality of what is happening to the political opposition, it's hard to see because it's not happening to you. It's happening to your colleagues. You're not in jeopardy of being arrested. My colleagues are. Your allies are not being taken down off the air. Ours are. If we don't all pull back and see this for what it is, we will wake up and there will be a day where our democracy is gone. And so I want to talk to my colleagues today about the totality of this plan. And it really happens in 5 steps. The first step is to convert the justice system into a political witch hunt operation. Every totalitarian relies on the justice system to punish dissent, but also to immunize illegality for loyalists. That's the deal you get in a totalitarian state. If you speak out against the government, well, then the legal system comes crashing down on you. But if you are loyal to the government, then you can get away with crimes. We are seeing this at scale right now. The indictment of James Comey for no crime. Not a single prosecutor in that office in Virginia would sign the indictment, not a single one, until President Trump sent his personal lawyer to take over that office, because only she would sign the indictment. We see this in the arrests that are being readied for at least one Democratic senator, for the Soros family, for the Attorney General of New York, for behavior that is not criminal, for behavior that apparently, reportedly, has been engaged in by plenty of other people. But you also see it in the way that it ultimately plays out in a very quiet way. The goal here is not to arrest everybody that opposes Donald Trump. The idea here is to just put enough fear into the ranks of those who might speak truth to power that they stay quiet. And it's undoubtedly happening. There are undoubtedly people in this country who see what is being threatened to Senator Schiff, what has happened to James Comey, and they have just decided to remain silent. This is a tried and true tactic of a totalitarian state, is that they threaten people with arrest if they speak up, and lots of people just decide not to speak up in the first place. But what also happens is that if you are loyal to the regime, you get away with crimes. See what happened to the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. He allegedly had committed a crime. He had committed significant corruption, but was exonerated by President Trump only after the mayor pledged his political loyalty to the president. In fact, one of the president's representatives and the mayor went on television to essentially publicly do the handshake. Loyalty from the mayor to the president, and exoneration of corruption from the government to the mayor. This is how totalitarian regimes control speech. They punish through the legal system dissent. They immunize corruption amongst those who are loyal. The second part of the plan is to eliminate free press and replace it with state-run media. Now, I don't know that I'd go so far to say that we have state-run media in the United States yet, but there is an attempt underway to try to use the vast regulatory powers of the administration to censor media. And again, the administration isn't hiding it. They are going on TV and celebrating the fact that in the latest instance, they threatened to pull the licenses of TV stations that didn't take off the air one of the president's loudest critics. But we also see it through the consolidation of media into the hands of allies of the president. One family that has just taken control of a major media group that owns, amongst other properties, CBS, is looking to also take control of CNN and may have an ownership stake and a control stake in TikTok. That family has shown a willingness to censor content, pulling Stephen Colbert off the air, and to put in place essentially Trump-approved censors for their future news content. Media, not necessarily through the state owning and operating media, but by the state using its regulatory powers, its control of licenses and mergers, to make clear to the billionaire class that they can own media, that they can make a lot of money off of media, but only if it propagates Trump's narrative and suppresses criticism. It's happening right now. We're watching it happen. The third step in the plan is to militarize law enforcement. the deployment of the military to Chicago and to Portland, to Los Angeles, is illegal. It is illegal. But it is designed to try to, once again, quell dissent and protest. This isn't about public safety. This is about political intimidation. And you're just naive if you think that folks aren't going to be a little bit less interested in showing up at a protest if they're worried about getting roughed up by law enforcement. You are naive to think that there isn't an impact on speech when the military is patrolling your streets. The signal that is being sent is that if you speak up in opposition to this president, you are going to be greeted by troop deployments and tear gas and military helicopters. The fourth step in this plan is seizing control of government spending and taxation. And here is where I fail to understand why there isn't bipartisan agreement, why we don't join hands. Our founding fathers saw what the British king did, using taxation and spending in order to compel loyalty to the crown, in order to punish the colonists when they rose up in defense of their rights. And so when they wrote the Constitution, they deliberately put the spending and taxation powers not in the hands of the executive, but in the hands of Congress, where every faction is represented. Thus, this body is in a position to broadly protect the rights of all people. Trump is seizing spending power from us, canceling grants unilaterally, most recently, brazenly deciding to refuse to spend money only in the states represented by Democrats. The day after the shutdown began, they announced that they were first suspending billions of dollars worth of projects in just one city, New York City, not coincidentally represented by the Democratic leader in the House and the Senate. And then hours after, they released a list of canceled energy projects. They listed the states that they were being canceled, and every single one of those states was represented by 2 Democratic senators. Everybody knew what was happening. It was an effort to use the spending power seized by the executive to punish representatives of the people who oppose the president politically. And then the fifth part of the plan is to rig the rules when the rules don't work for you. This is happening in the way that President Trump is going state by state and demanding that congressional lines be redrawn in the middle of a 10-year cycle in which traditionally we leave lines as they are. Why? He's, again, been totally honest and transparent about it. He just wants more Republicans elected. Even if the majority of people in a particular state favor Democrats, he wants the lines drawn in a way that would elect more Republicans to Congress. Now, in this case, it's of course forced Democratic states to do the same, but it was Donald Trump that started this cycle of changing the rules in order to make sure that his party stays in power, that he stays in power no matter how unpopular he gets. You see the same thing happening with respect to the control of information. Totalitarian states, they can't accept truth. They can't accept truth, so they try to destroy truth. Well, that's what Donald Trump is doing by banning reporters from the White House that don't toe the Trump or MAGA line. That's what they're doing in saying to reporters at the Department of Defense, you can't report on military operations unless you are given pre-approval. That's what happened to the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. When the labor statistics showed that the economy wasn't good, that guy got fired and replaced by somebody who would issue fake numbers that made the economy look better. You convert the justice system so that it pursues your political enemies and exonerates your political loyalists for crimes. You eliminate the free press and you replace it with a state-run or state-influenced media. You militarize law enforcement. You seize control of government spending and taxation. You rig the rules of democracy in your favor. You can't see the indictment of Comey, the cancellation of Kimmel, the troops in Chicago as different events. They are all part of the same story. They are all part of a plan, a well-thought-out plan to try to destroy American democracy and create a new set of rules that will allow Trump and his allies to rule forever. I know this sounds extreme. It is. But if you connect the dots, if you allow yourself to see the whole story, the totality of this story, you will see the grave danger that we are in. I know that it's often easiest for all of us, but probably especially for supporters of the president who still support democracy, to just assume the best instead of assuming the worst, or to just kind of close the door and batten down the hatches until the storm leaves town. But think about how we will feel if this 250-year democratic experiment disappears on our watch, and we didn't do all we could as a body and as a citizenry, simply because we didn't want to face the hard reality. The authoritarian takeover isn't coming. It's here. We're in the middle of it. But it is not too late for everybody to see it and for us to stop it. I yield the floor.
President,
The Democratic whip,
are we in a quorum call?
we are not.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today, for the first time since her confirmation earlier this year, Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee to answer for her tenure in the office of the Attorney General for this calendar year. From the outset, the Attorney General was not apparently happy to be there. She ducked many questions, and I think she believed we wouldn't notice. We did. In her opening statement, the Attorney General said, quote, that playing politics with law enforcement powers, as she claims previous administrations have, will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust. And that, quote, this is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. That's interesting coming from an Attorney General who, over the course of 8 very long months, has presided over exactly such a betrayal of public trust. The Attorney General has systematically weaponized the Department of Justice, turning it into a shield to protect President Trump and his allies and a sword to attack his opponents. She has made clear that her loyalties lie first and foremost with the President, not with the Constitution. And in doing so, she effectively has shut down justice at the Department of Justice even before the party controlling the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives shut down the government. Last week on the Senate floor and in the wake of the federal indictment against former FBI Director James Comey that was ordered by President Trump expressly, I warned of the dangers posed by weaponizing the Justice Department in a political fashion. A president enabled by people like this Attorney General who can warp the Department of Justice and FBI into a personal police force to target his enemies can turn it against ordinary Americans too. And unfortunately, the city of Chicago, which I'm proud to represent, is feeling that today. In an especially egregious instance in the city's South Shore neighborhood last Tuesday night, hundreds of armed federal agents rappelled from Black Hawk helicopters and swarmed an apartment building in the South Shore area. This made-for-movies entrance was into a building which apparently the ICE agents knew little about the occupants. ICE rampaged through the building, breaking down doors, rousting people out of bed, rounding up the residents without cause, detaining many with zip ties, including women and children. When one of the ICE agents was confronted with the children, he said, "F them kids." Detaining not just immigrants, but U.S. citizens for hours on end with no justification isn't fighting crime. It's cruel and it's un-American. Attorney General Bondi's Justice Department has defended this dubious legal basis for federal deployments in Illinois and diverted Department of Justice personnel and their components to assist with these efforts. So today, many of us pushed her for answers. I asked her if anyone at the White House consulted her about the National Guard deployments to Chicago and other cities. She refused to answer that she'd even had a conversation with the White House about their justification for sending hundreds of National Guard troops into the city of Chicago. I asked what secret the Attorney General was trying to hide from the American people, who deserve to know the legitimate, legal rationale deploying American military to our cities. She responded by attempting to blame Democrats for the Republican shutdown and attacking me for not loving Chicago as much as I hate President Trump. That was a quote. I've been a member of the Judiciary Committee for 20 years plus. Never have I encountered a witness from any other administration of either political party responding to legitimate questions with personal attacks. She had a personal attack crafted for each one of the senators and thought she was getting the best of us. But that kind of unserious response is what we've come to expect from Trump administration officials, whose priority is loyalty, not the rule of law. If DOJ is serious about reducing crimes, they would work in conjunction with state and local leaders to implement evidence-based policies that do drive down violence. But the fact is that this administration actually cares more about spreading fear into the hearts of our communities and catering to the vengeful whims of President Trump and Steve Miller. It's political theater with an immense human price tag. I also asked the Attorney General about the Epstein client list she wouldn't touch it. She said in February publicly that the client list was, quote, sitting on her desk. Well, it's October, and the American people are still waiting for answers on this. She refused today to provide any information about this list. And we know why. A few months ago, a credible whistleblower told my office that FBI agents were instructed to flag any mention of President Trump in the files for Mr. Epstein. If true, that's not law enforcement, that's political protection. So I pressed her again today for more information to be made public. She refused. Mr. President, what we saw in today's hearing was an Attorney General unwilling, maybe unable, to defend what has happened in her department. Whether it's the Epstein files, Chicago immigration raids, sweetheart deals for Trump allies, or the mass purging of career law enforcement, her silence tells a story. Saying, quote, I'm not going to discuss this with you, may have worked today, but one day she'll need to answer for her conduct in this role, and she'll need to defend her record, one that saw the dismantling of the Department of Justice for political purposes on her watch. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from Utah.
Mr. President, the story of America is the story of a people who looked upon the West and saw promise. Where others saw wilderness, Americans saw a future. They dammed rivers that had flowed ungoverned since creation, mined mountains that had defied the reach of man, and turned harsh plains into fields that would feed a continent. From that audacity came a republic that could feed itself, power itself, and then, when tested, defend itself. The Federal Land Policy and Management Act, known commonly as FLPMA, enshrined this principle of multiple use and sustained yield for federal lands. It codified the promise that the land belongs to the people and ought, therefore, to serve them. Its promise was plural: energy, grazing, recreation, timber, conservation, each coexisting with the others in balanced and productive harmony. The law does not permit federal officials to choose one purpose to the exclusion of all the rest. It demands balance, and it demands use in particular. But the Biden administration's clerics of the Green New scam disregarded that agreement, struck nearly a half century ago. They preferred a museum to a nation, an America under glass, admired but untouchable. Under their edicts, vast stretches of land, millions upon millions of acres, have been sealed off from the citizens who built their livelihoods upon them. In Montana, North Dakota, and Alaska, communities that have mined, grazed, and worked for generations are now treated as trespassers in their own story. Their supposed crime is self-reliance, hardly something we should be seeking to punish. Their punishment is unemployment. The Senate now faces 3 resolutions that would help restore the balance. Each disapproves of a Biden administration decision that violated the multiple-use mandate of FLPMA and locked away public land from productive Americans, contrary to FLPMA's promise. In Montana, for example, the Miles City Resource Management Plan barred future coal leasing across nearly 2 million acres, erasing access to 338 million tons of clean domestic coal. In North Dakota, more than 4 million acres of federal coal reserves were closed, nearly 99% of the reserves available in that state. And in Alaska, the Central Yukon Resource Management Plan imposed new restrictions on 56 million acres of land, including millions of acres newly labeled as quote-unquote areas of critical environmental concern. One of the great trick plays used by the left in order to bring about de facto wilderness or de facto monument designations without actually having to go through the process that the relevant laws would require. Joe Biden's bureaucrats rode over the voices of those who actually live near that land and live with the consequences of these bad decisions. And the results were predictable: higher costs, lost jobs, and deeper dependence on nations that, to put it mildly, do not wish us well. Every shuttered mine, every idled rig is an act of self-imposed amnesia, a willful type of forgetting of what made America both prosperous and free. Now, luckily, President Trump and Secretary Burgum are correcting that course. They're returning resource management plans to their proper role under the law. That is, to manage the land responsibly and keep it working for the American people, the intended beneficiaries of those lands. The Congressional Review Act allows us, mercifully, to repeal these unlawful plans and restore the statutory balance Congress intended and Congress, in fact, created with the Congressional Review Act. When these resolutions of disapproval take effect, after they've been passed and signed into law by President Trump, the Bureau of Land Management will still have the necessary environmental analysis to issue new resource management plans that are consistent with the law and the clear intent of Congress. Plans that open access where it was previously closed, respect local voices that were previously ignored and bring federal management back within its legal bounds. That is how the process should work. That's how it's supposed to work. Under the law as written, it's how it does work. It's at least how it always should have worked, but didn't work under the Biden administration, like so many other things. Now, Republicans are defending the right of a free people here, the right of a free people to power their own future, to determine their own course. Democrats are still genuflecting before the altar of the Green New scam, clinging to their faith in their false hope that if only Americans grow poorer, the planet will somehow grow purer. And in that same spirit of self-righteous delusion, this week, Democrats are yet again bringing forth a measure to denounce President Trump for declaring an energy emergency. It's a gesture so unserious, it would be comical if it weren't so dangerous. At the very moment when the world is entering an energy race that will decide who commands the engines of artificial intelligence and all that go along with it, who manufactures the tools of war, and who will feed and defend their people, Democrats have instead chosen to strike a pose. They're congratulating themselves for denying the existence of the fire while standing in the smoke and holding the matches. Theirs are the politics of aesthetic virtue. Better to be cold and appear righteous than to be warm and competent. But the American people, fortunately, are not fools. They understand that we can no longer afford to pad the pockets of Democratic allies propping up unreliable industries that cannot, no matter how hard Democrats wish it were otherwise, they cannot keep the lights on, while punishing the workers and the communities that can, and will, if only we will allow it, without undue interference from the U.S. government. These resolutions to overturn the reckless Biden-era land plans are part of that larger defense. They would restore lawful management to public lands, honor the voices of those who live nearest to them and are therefore most directly affected by them, and keep faith with the law Congress enacted. Mr. President, nations that lose their memory soon lose their nerve. The same spirit that split the Rockies and bridged the Golden Gate cannot be reconciled with a bureaucracy that measures virtue by paralysis. America, in short, was not built by those who made idols of the land, but by those who worked it, and in so doing, ennobled both themselves and it. We cannot continue to bow to the Ashtoreth of climate alarmism and bow to the Moloch of eco-terrorism and pretend that that is going to work out well for America. Americans know better. Rewinding these management plans will not desecrate the environment, far from it. But they will deliver. They will deliver it from an orthodoxy that mistakes idleness for piety, reminding us that liberty, like the land itself, touched. It's therefore with all the energy, enthusiasm that I'm capable of communicating that I invite my colleagues to do the right thing, to vote for these resolutions of disapproval, and to right the gross wrong that has been inflicted on the American people, particularly Americans in and around the states affected by these ill-designed, ill-conceived resource management plans. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
The senator from Montana.
Mr. President, today the Senate will vote to proceed to my joint resolution to congressionally disapprove and officially roll back President Biden's anti-coal rule in Montana. H.J. Res. 104 is supported by the entire Montana delegation. And I want to thank Congressman Downing and Congressman Zinke for leading this resolution in the House, and for Senator Sheehy for joining me in the Senate. And this resolution is supported by many Montanans, starting with the governor of Montana, Governor Greg Gianforte, the mayor of Colstrip, Montana, the Montana Coal Council, the Montana Electric Co-ops, Northwestern Energy, local counties, both of the affected coal mines, and many, many more, and I will tell you, many, many more coal miners. I want to explain quickly what we are doing here today. Today we will take the first step in overturning the Miles City Resource Management Plan amendment that prohibits any new coal leasing in eastern Montana. Let me be very clear, this resolution only overturns the anti-coal amendment that was issued by the Biden administration after the last election in the final days of their term. None of the actions taken today affect the underlying Miles City Resource Management Plan or how the BLM manages recreation, conservation, and other energy developments in the state. Future coal development will be managed under the existing resource management plan as it had for years before Biden slipped in at the last hour this amendment. Now, why is this important to Montana? The Biden amendment prohibits all new coal leasing across all of eastern Montana. Eastern Montana and Wyoming are home to the Powder River Basin. These are the largest coal reserves in the United States. Many who are watching, when you think about Montana, you think about our amazing fly fishing streams, our national parks, our beautiful mountains, our wilderness areas, the tremendous hunting and hiking opportunities we provide. But many don't know that Montana has more recoverable coal than any state in the United States. And think about this, the Biden administration prohibited new coal development in America's largest coal reserve. BLM's resource management plans are meant to be a bipartisan process, taking in feedback from people on the ground and implementing the multiple use mission of the BLM. But sadly, the Biden administration tried to pull a fast one. They took this process, flipped it on its face, and they disregarded the voices of Montana. Well, I can tell you here this afternoon, the voices of Montana are speaking loudly with a united Montana delegation both here in Washington as well as Montanans back home in the state, and we are going to right that wrong today. We're going to give Montana a voice in the process. Overturning this partisan rule will grow Montana energy jobs and help our rural communities. In fact, according to the Montana Coal Council, coal supports nearly 900 high-paying jobs in Montana and has provided $2.7 billion in federal, state, private, and tribal royalties. And in a letter from Montana's Governor Greg Gianforte, he states this Biden rule amounts to a loss of $4.3 billion in future revenue to the state trust land beneficiaries, which includes K through 12 public education. This is a monumental moment for the state of Montana. I'm thrilled this is being considered today on the floor of the United States Senate, and I urge my colleagues to support Montana jobs, Montana communities, reliable and low-cost energy, and to vote yes on today's motion.
The senator from Arkansas.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding Rule 22, it be in order for the majority leader or his designee to make motions to proceed to H.J. Res. 104, H.J. Res. 105, and H.J. Res. 106, respectively, if the Senate companion measure has been discharged from committee, and for Senator Schiff or his designee to make a motion to discharge S.J. Res. 83.
Without objection.
I know of no further debate on the nominations.
If there's no further debate, the question is on the nomination on block. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alstabrooks. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Mr. Booker. Thank you. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Britt. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Thank you. Mr. Coons. Thanks. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Arono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey,
Mr. Marshall. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McCormick. Mr. Merkley. Mrs. Moody. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moreno. Mr. Mullen, Ms. Markowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Banks, Cassidy, Kramer, Cruz, Daines, Hoven, Johnson, Kennedy, Langford, Lee, Marshall, Mullen, Ricketts, Schmidt, Scott of Florida, Tillis. Senators voting in the negative: Also Brooks, Blunt Rochester, Hickenlooper, Kane, Murphy, Smith, Warnock, Warren, White. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Schatz, no. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Lujan, no. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Young. Mr. Young, aye. Ms. Collins, aye. Would you, Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Crapo, aye. Ms. Baldwin, Ms. Baldwin, no. Mr. Heinrich, no. Ms. Hassan, no. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Fetterman, no. Mr. Cotton, aye. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Welch, no. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. Cornyn, aye.
Do I have to do that 107 times?
Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Van Hollen, no. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Markey, no. Ms. Slotkin, no. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mr. Kim, no. Ms. Cortez Masto, no. Mr. Moreno, aye. Mr. Rounds, aye. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Gallego, no. Mr. Kelly, no. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Ms. Rosen, no. Mr. Budd, aye. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Mrs. Hyde Smith, aye. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. King, no. Ms. Hirono, no. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Thune, aye. Ms. Cantwell, no. Mr. Shipp, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Sanders, no. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Reed, no. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Ossoff, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Coons, no. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mr. Warner, no. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Justice, Mr. Justice, aye.
The yeas are 51, the nays are 47. The nominations in block are confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table, and the President will be immediately notified of the Senate's actions. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to legislative session, be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President,
the Democratic Leader.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to legislative session, be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to... Oh, that's Thune.
He did it already.
I used to do that. I move to proceed to calendar 167S2882.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 167S2882, a bill making continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes.
Motion to the desk.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 167S2882, a bill making continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators as follows.
I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
I withdraw my motion to proceed.
The Senator has that right. The motion is withdrawn.
Mr. President,
the Majority Leader.
I move to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes.
I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators as follows.
I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to H.J. Res 104.
The question is on the motion.
I ask for the ayes and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks. Sir. Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, thank you. Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice.
Did you get my no vote? Great,
Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith,
Yes, I was happy. Very happy.
Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Banks, Barrasso, Blackburn, Bozeman, Britt, Budd, Capito, Cornyn, Cotton, Crapo, Deans, Fisher, Grassley, Haggerty, Hawley, Hoven, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Justice, Kennedy, Langford, Lee, Lummis, Marshall, McConnell, McCormick, Moody, Moran, Marino, Mullen, Murkowski, Paul, Risch, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of South Carolina, Wicker, and Young. Senators voting in the negative: Alsobrooks, Baldwin, Bennett, Blumenthal, Blunt-Rochester, Booker, Cantwell, Coons, Cortez Masto, Duckworth, Durbin, Fetterman, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hassan, Heinrich, Hirono, Kane, Kelly, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Murray, Ossoff, Padilla, Peters, Reed, Rosen, Sanders, Schatz, Schiff, Shaheen, Slotkin, Smith, Warner, Warren, Welch, and Wyden. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Hickenlooper, no. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Van Hollen, no. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Thune, aye. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Warnock, no. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, no. Mr. Ricketts. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, aye.
On this vote, the ayes are 50, the nays are 47. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report.
HJ Res 104, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Miles City Field Office Record of Decision and approved Resource Management Plan Amendment.
President.
Senator from Vermont.
Thank you. Madam President, we are now approaching day 7 of the government shutdown. The Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, they run the government, and they have the responsibility to keep the government open. And in that light, it might be a good idea, a radical idea, but in the midst of the crises that we are facing, it really might be nice for Speaker Johnson to actually bring House members back to Washington after their 18-day vacation. The American people are nervous about this shutdown. Federal employees are deeply disturbed. People are frightened. Republicans in the House should return to work. Madam President, as we all know, Senate rules require a 60-vote majority in order to pass a budget, 60 votes. And that means that passing a budget requires bipartisan support. That is why decades ago the rules were established. It is very rare that one party has more than 60 votes. So if you need 60 votes, it means that you have to compromise, you have to negotiate. When Democrats were in power, they had to work with Republicans to get to 60 votes. When Republicans in the past were in power, they had to work with Democrats to get the 60 votes. That's the way it worked. But not now. This time around, the Republicans have refused to negotiate. Basically, what they are saying is it is their way or the highway. Take it or leave it. So, Madam President, within that context of Republicans refusing to negotiate, what is this shutdown about? What are the major issues that separate the parties? Well, it is not complicated. Madam President, as everybody in America knows, our healthcare system today is broken, it is dysfunctional, it is cruel. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, but we are the only major country not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And in fact, our health care outcomes are worse in most cases than other major countries. It is a broken system. Today, in the richest country on earth, 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured, and that results in some 60,000 Americans dying every single year unnecessarily because they can't afford to go to a doctor. We pay the highest prices in the world for health care. It is unbelievable and unsustainable. We are now spending over $14,000 for every man, woman, and child. When you throw in Medicare, Medicaid, employer-covered health care, individual costs, over $14,000. That is insane, almost twice as much as other countries around the world. We pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. 1 out of 4 Americans can't afford to go and fill the prescription their doctors write. In America today, in our great country, we don't have enough doctors. People all over America, in Vermont, all over America, have to wait months to get in to see a specialist. We don't have enough nurses, massive nursing shortage. We don't have enough dentists. We don't have enough mental health counselors. And our life expectancy, how long we live, is substantially lower than other major countries, despite the fact that we spend so much more. Now, given that reality, given that our healthcare system is broken, one might think that the issue we are debating today is how do we improve it? How do we make sure that in America we appreciate health care as a human right, which it is? How do we guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child in a cost-effective way? In my view, that is moving toward a Medicare for all single-payer system. Other people got ideas, bring them forward. Health care is a human right. But that is not the debate we are having now. The debate we are having now is not how we improve a broken healthcare system, but how we prevent a broken healthcare system from becoming even worse. And I will tell you, Madam President, as the ranking member of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, somebody who has studied this issue for a while, I fear very much that if we do not stop Trump's attack on the American healthcare system, the entire system could collapse. We are on the verge of that right now. People can't afford health care. People can't find doctors. People can't find mental health counselors. People can't afford prescription drugs. We have a drug epidemic. We are on the verge of collapse. Madam President, what this debate is about in Florida and Vermont and all over this country is if Republicans get their way and if Democrats cave in, health insurance premiums will double for over 20 million people on the Affordable Care Act. Yes, you heard right. 20 million people will see a doubling of their health care premiums. You can't afford health care now? Of course you can't. It's outrageously high. That's not Bernie Sanders talking. That is the Kaiser Family Foundation study. That is one of the most conservative members, Republican members of the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene, making that point. A doubling of health insurance premiums. Does any member of the United States Senate want to go home to their district and explain why you're going to double premiums? But it's not just raising the outrageous cost of health care in America even higher. As a result of Trump's big, beautiful bill, 15 million Americans are going to be thrown off of the health care they have because Trump and the Republicans made the largest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. And let us be very clear. These cuts not only impact 15 million Americans, that would be a tragedy unto itself. They will devastate nursing homes. Right now, the situation of nursing homes in Vermont, and I expect many other states in this country, is a disaster. They are understaffed. Nursing homes in an aging society are shutting down. Where will people who are old and can't take care of themselves, who are disabled, what happens to them if the nursing home industry collapses in America? Community health centers, something that I've worked on for many years to increase funding. Over 32 million people access community health centers. They provide primary health care, dental care, mental health counseling, lower-cost prescription drugs. They will suffer enormously, cut back on services, perhaps shut down, because of that legislation if we do not deal with that. Rural hospitals, Republicans say, oh, we put $50 billion into rural hospitals. Yeah, but you cut $150 billion. And all over this country, rural hospitals are teetering on the edge. Many of them have already closed down over the years. So you live in a rural America, state of Vermont, you want a hospital nearby? Well, that hospital may not be there. Now, why did Trump and the Republicans make these massive cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act? And the answer is not complicated. It was important for them to provide $1 trillion to the top 1%. $1 trillion. Massive cuts to health care trillion in tax breaks to the 1%. No. So let me make the very radical suggestion that Elon Musk, who is now worth some $500 billion, does not need another tax break. Today, we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of America. Musk himself owns more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%. Never before have we seen such income and wealth disparity. Republicans said we're going to massively cut Medicaid, ACA, in order to give tax breaks to the richest people in America. But the issue that we are debating, Madam President, is not just health care, as enormously important as that is. What we are talking about is whether we are going to allow our country to move toward an authoritarian society run by a president who is a megalomaniac, who wants more and more power in his own hands, who does not respect the rule of law or the Constitution of the United States of America. It is not acceptable to me that our president is putting federal troops on city streets throughout America without a request from a governor or a mayor, trying to create provocations, trying to create disturbances so we can use military force against the American people. Madam President, we cannot allow masked ICE agents to snatch people off of our streets without due process. We cannot continue to allow President Trump to undermine the Constitution and the rule of law by refusing to spend money appropriated by Congress. Unbelievable. President says, well, money was appropriated to states which committed the terrible crime. You know what their crime was? They voted against Donald Trump. And in this world right now, I guess if a state votes against Trump, maybe you're not going to get the federal money that was appropriated, whether it's Vermont, New York, New Jersey, other states. Is that really what the United States of America is about? A president say, you vote against me, you're not going to get your tax dollars back in federal investments. Madam President, according to every poll that I have seen, the American people, by huge numbers, do not want to see a doubling of their health care premiums. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 78% of Americans, including 59% of Republicans, want to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and the polling numbers are equally high, or almost as high, to making sure that people are not thrown off of Medicaid. Tony Fabrizio, who is President Trump's own pollster, it's not just the general pollster, he's the pollster for the president. This is what he said, quote, by broad bipartisan margins, voters want to see the ACA tax credits extended rather than expire at the end of the year, whether in the context of premiums doubling or 5 million families losing their health insurance. This includes solid majorities of Trump voters and swing voters, end quote. That is the Republican pollster. Right now in the House, to the best of my knowledge, there are at least 14 Republicans in a very tightly controlled caucus who want to see the ACA tax credits extended. Here in the Senate, there's at least one Republican senator who understands that in his state, his people cannot afford a doubling of premiums. And my strong feeling is there are many, many other Republicans who are not excited about going home and explaining to their constituents why their premiums are doubling. Madam President, as the ranking member of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, I asked people across the country in the last few days what these health care cuts that the Republicans are pushing would mean for them. We just sent out emails, and we've gotten many, many, many hundreds of responses. And we asked them, what would a doubling of health care premiums mean to your life and your family? What would it mean if you were one of the 15 million Americans thrown off of health care through cuts in Medicaid? What would it mean to you if the rural hospital near you shut down because of these Medicaid cuts? And in less than a week, we received responses, many hundreds, from 42 states and the District of Columbia. And today, we are releasing a report that describes the devastating human impact of the Republican budget and its massive cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. And here is just some of what we found. People are afraid that they could get sicker or even die. Laura, I won't give her last name, from Wisconsin said, and I quote, "I live in fear of whether or not I will be able to afford my life-saving treatment. I have a rare kidney disease that requires immunotherapy every 9 months. I am terrified I will die," end quote. And we got a lot of those. People who are dealing with very serious illnesses who, in fact, will die. They will die if they cannot afford health insurance, and they will not be able to afford health insurance if their premiums double or if they're thrown off of Medicaid. But it's not just the fear that people will die or get sicker because they lack health care. All over this country, working-class Americans will not be able to afford the food they need, pay their rent or their mortgage, or health care. Brittany from Utah writes, quote, "I am already living paycheck to paycheck. I have insurance for myself and my 2 sons, just bought a house that we can barely afford," end of quote. So she's hanging on the edge. She has to pay more for health care. Maybe she loses her house. Sebastian from Colorado writes, quote, "I don't make enough to afford rent and food and health insurance. Only 2 of those things do I need to survive. These cuts make it even more impossible to turn things around and get a handle on health issues," end of quote. In other words, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Today, they can't afford housing. Today, they can't afford child care. Today, they can't afford good quality food for their kids. Today, they can't afford to send their kids to college. Double health care premiums, and these families are going to be in disastrous shape. Cara from Vermont said, quote, she was shocked by the warning about the loss of the advanced federal subsidy. Rather than a premium of $100 a month, I could be paying more than $1,200 a month, or 35% of my income, and that's before deductibles and copays. And by the way, when we talk about a doubling of health insurance premiums, that's on average. Some people will pay less, some people will pay a lot more. Small business owners are concerned they will have to shut down. Joe from Pennsylvania writes, quote, "I'm a small business owner, and if my health care costs continue to rise, I will be forced to close my business and look for a job if I can find one," end quote. Patricia from rural California writes, quote, "If our local clinics and hospitals close, as they are likely to do, with federal funding disappearing, along with health insurance becoming unaffordable, people will die," end quote. She's right. On average, health care premiums will double. But here's what happens when it is not average. If you are living in Virginia, your premiums could go up from less than $650 a month today to nearly $2,200 a month next year, $650 to $2,200. That is not a doubling. It's almost a quadrupling of what you're paying. If you live in Idaho, your premiums could go up from $283 a month to $407 a month. If you live in the state of Georgia, your family could see their premiums go up from $940 a month today to over $4,000 a month. Madam President, at a time when people today cannot afford health care, the idea of doubling, tripling health care premiums is insane. It is unacceptable, and no member of the United States Senate should support that. So, Madam President, no, I am not going to go back to Vermont and tell the people there that I have thrown 15 million Americans off the health care that they have, at a time when studies indicate that will mean that tens and tens of thousands of people will die as a result. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to vote for a health care situation which doubles premiums for 20 million Americans. So, Madam President, we are where we are right now. And the time is now when the United States Congress has got to look beyond their campaign contributors, has got to look behind the oligarchs who fund their campaigns, and have got to begin standing up for ordinary Americans. Our job is to improve a broken healthcare system and guarantee healthcare to all. Our job is not to throw 15 million people off healthcare and double premiums for more than 20 million, to shutter nursing homes, community health centers, and rural hospitals. The choice is clear. Let us stand with the American people. Thank you. I would yield the floor.